Now, before we begin, we'd like to start by acknowledging that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Munsee Lenape people. We make this statement as a step in the process of combating the erasure of Native people, both past and present. Additionally, we recognize that all work on traditional stolen land of other tribal nations and are working towards educating our own communities about their history. Now, today we're going to talk about some themes that we've been talking about throughout the day, and it's really been nice to engage with a lot of you on some of these conversations, and it's really interesting to see what those have been centered around. And honestly, the common thread has been a need and a desire working more towards respect and empathy, and really acknowledging the fact that we are all in this together, and sometimes we create our own divisives and diversions to segregate ourselves. And also a really great conversation about pay equity in our industry. We will be your hosts for this session. My name is Kevin Maynard. I am the Executive Director of Quad City Arts. We split the border between Iowa and Illinois. I use he, him pronouns, and I am joined by Danielle Van Hook.
Hey guys. Thanks, Kevin. My name is Danielle Van Hook, and I use the pronouns she and her. I'm the Director of Youth Theater Programs at the Alden in McLean, Virginia. We are a part of the team that produces the Arts Touring podcast, There's No Business Like, along with our friends, Brian Zelmer, who is somewhere. Oh my gosh. Josh Benson, and Katie Miller. In today's session, we're going to talk to people like us who saw a need in the industry and got to work to fill it. We're also going to have some smaller breakout sessions, but we're going to talk about those a little bit later. When we were talking about the session, we decided to call it You Can Do the Thing, because when we started the podcast, we had a huge list of reasons as to why we weren't the right people to do it, but we ultimately decided that there wasn't a need to wait for somebody else. But we also want to recognize the immense privilege that came with that for the five of us to be able to just get up and do it. So with us here today, we're really pleased to welcome our guests. Our first guest is Javier Stel Fresquez. He's a lifelong performer who's passionate about the LGBTQ+ indigenous communities and started the Weaving Spirits Festivals, which showcases two-spirit performers. Leah Keefe, who is committed to elevating BIPOC voices on stage and connecting with new audiences. Leah is the co-founder and director of Rhythm of the Arts.
Dominic Moore Dunson is an award-winning choreographer, professional dancer, podcaster, and more. Along with being the founder of his entertainment company, Moore Dunson, he also started the Akron Black Artists Guild. Katie Miller is one of the hosts of the There's No Business Like podcast. She's a passionate advocate for arts education, access to the arts, and diversity, equity, and inclusion work. She's also the senior manager of community engagement at the Midland Center for the Arts. Now we'll get started with Javier. What need did you see and what creative problem solving did you use to fill that?
Okay. Hello, testing. It's on. Fantastic. Hi, everyone, and hello again, if you saw me on the stage earlier. I would like to give a fuller introduction. I'm originally from El Paso, Texas, the borderlands between New Mexico, Texas, and Mexico. And I have lived in Yelamu, San Francisco, the Bay Area, for about 15 years now. I am Piru Antigua, Pueblo, we're descendant of those Pueblo nations. And my indigenous ancestry moved down during the Pueblo Revolt, which successfully kicked the Spanish out of Santa Fe for, I think it was decades, I forget. But my folks actually moved down with the Spanish to the south when they fled to the south into El Paso. Long, complex history there, but I have to name it in relationship to the work that I do in the Bay Area, because I work with indigenous communities there of various backgrounds, but primarily focused in work with the Two-Spirit community. So I'll throw around the acronym BATES a lot. BATES is the Bay Area American Indian Two-Spirits. the name carries particular histories and words we no longer use that much, or folks of older generation do still continue to use American Indian. I don't recommend it to anyone in this room unless that's something you identify as. And the organization itself, nonprofit organization, is really a reflection of the larger community, the Bay Area Two Spirits. There we've started the first Two-Spirit powwow, and that is going to have its 12th year on February 4th. If anyone's in the area, you're very welcome. I'm a co-chair of the powwow committee this year there. So that's an all-volunteer run powwow with Two Spirits leading it. Two Spirit is a term here. I'll use it to mean, I'll use it to cover anyone who is Native American and also LGBTQ. So I first came to the Bay and started meeting folks in that community about 9 years ago, maybe 10, as I was finishing up my college years in the Bay. I'll go ahead and name that I got a degree from Stanford, because it's somewhat relevant to doing the thing. When I first started going to the Two-Spirit powwow, and when I started learning about and meeting different Two-Spirits, folks like me who were at various points of connection to their indigenous culture, their indigenous life ways, and asking the question, trying to feel out if there was any space for them in their home communities as queer LGBTQ people. There was just a lot of questions being asked. There was a lot of people coming into their fullness and just figuring out what their place was at home. The organization itself had already been putting on a powwow for years that was growing somewhat exponentially each year. And it hardly had enough funds to put on its powwow. I started doing every little thing that I could as a producer, someone who had technical writing skills, could write grants. They didn't have access to grants because they didn't have the right fiscal sponsor locally, and because the organization's ethic and the community's ethic was around doing things all volunteer. We've transitioned out of that because we now have a very large powwow that attracts thousands of people in a single day, and so we kind of have to grow into a more nonprofit approach. But in the meantime, I was doing different things as a satellite to that nonprofit to try and get funding to the community and try and fund through my own sort of production company, I can call it. But yes, I was writing grants and executing events. And all of that brought me to lots of relationship building in the community, lots of getting to know local California natives, lots of building relationship with the work and the services that were already being provided, the community that was being built. And myself as an artist and a performing artist, I started to want to bring more spaces of creative expression and the emboldening of my folks to visibilize ourselves, to make the performance-based works that we want to tell more and more people about our particular stories of resilience and of the fullness of our cultures, which so often includes remembering back to a time when Two Spirits in the respective tribes were revered, very often revered. We're not a monolith. There are so many variations of everything I could say about what Two-Spirit is and has been historically. But nowadays we know that a lot of how people are treated is a product of the great forgetting created by Christianity. And so I came around to realizing that we needed a space for indigenous-led creative expression that was also safe for queer folks, LGBTQ folks, to talk about their intersectional realities and identities. and I made Weaving Spirits Festival of Two-Spirit performance. I think we wrote a grant for Kenneth Rainin Foundation. Counterpulse Theater approached us to actually write that grant with us. And though I felt completely underqualified in terms of my rootedness in community and in relationship to my own native culture, I worked with a vet, literally. She's a war vet, and a drag mother, who is also the protocol director of our Two-Spirit powwow. With her in an intergenerational team that we are, we did the first year of this Weaving Spirits Festival of Two-Spirit performance, and it showcased multiple genres, a huge range, many of the artists who were running Bates, the organization that runs the Two-Spirit powwow. And in it, we learned from, or we kind of took and appropriated with permission, enthusiastic permission, Counterpulse's residency program, their ARC residency program, which is very artist-centric. It really focuses on artists. What is your next step? What do you want to do? What does your aesthetic and interests and curiosities lead you to want to do? And so with that, we're providing workshop experiences, creative development, as well as open commission with a certain duration of a performance offering that they can stretch or contract. Usually folks come back with something that's like 60 minutes long, and we have beautiful, rich, split bill performances when we do the festival in San Francisco. So I think what we've found from that is that people now have a space to realize that they can consider themselves artists. Most of these artists are only invited to give a land acknowledgement and then go home. A space to express themselves fully, build out works at length and scale, and so many other kinds of connecting, so many other kinds of joy that comes through from that. And it took the boldness of Counterpulse deciding to work with me and learn. It took my boldness realizing that no one else was going to make this kind of a space. And yeah, there's lots of lessons there.
So hello, everybody. My name is Leah Keith. I'm with Rhythm of the Arts, which is my own agency and producing company. And so these lovely folks invited me here today to speak about how I did the thing. And to give you a little bit of context of my background quickly, I started out in this business as a touring flamenco dancer. So I was on the road with a flamenco company for the first part of my career. I went through a career transition where I went back to school and I got my MFA in Performing Arts Management from Brooklyn College. And in Brooklyn College, working in development marketing, I ended up being an agent. So I started being an agent in 2013, right after I graduated with my master's. And I had the luck, or it just so happened, I was working for one of the larger agencies in the performing arts sector. And big dance, classical agency. And I had, the privilege of working there. Obviously, it opened up a lot of doors to different relationships with presenters across the country. And at the same time, there's my love of my art, of flamenco, of world music. I am Latina and have a great love for my culture, for diverse voices on stage. So I worked with this agency. I worked with another large agency after that, Columbia Artists, which shut down during the pandemic. So it shut down in August of 2020. So My company, Rhythm of the Arts, was founded by my husband in 2005 as an umbrella for his artistic endeavors, which included a company that is called Mexico Beyond Mariachi that does arts and that at its core does arts and education in the tri-state area. That's how they started, going into schools, doing workshops. And when I was in my work, in between my agency jobs, between these two large agencies, there came a time where I said, okay, let's try producing some things. There was a lack of, in the children's theater space, I felt there was a lack of authentic cultural voices, right? And we were also looking at, okay, what does Mexico Beyond Mariachi have to offer? And so we brought together the creatives to work on a children's show called Sugar Skull, a Dia de Muertos musical adventure. And so fast forward back to when the pandemic ended. So Sugar Skull went out on tour with Columbia artists that I was with. And when the company shut down in August of 2020, we were in the process of creating a virtual Sugar Skull. And it was like, okay, what do we do now? What do we do now? Like this foundation, this solid foundation, the health insurance, everything just went out the window. My husband's work obviously dried up as an artist as well. And it was like, well, I have this platform because I have been fortunate enough to work for larger companies that have opened up doors for me. Let us build out the agency arm of Rhythm of the Arts and use it for what we want, for what is important for us, which is elevating BIPOC voices, cultural voices, culturally diverse voices. So I'm proud to say that we're still figuring that out. It's only been, Rhythm of the Arts in the capacity it's in has only been what it is since February or I guess maybe APAP 21, APAP 2021. But I'm proud to say that we do have a diverse roster and that it's all about elevating these diverse voices and using the privilege that I have for having worked with those larger agencies to open doors for those artists.
Hello, everybody. My name is Dominic Moore-Dunson. I'm a dancer choreographer and the co-founder of the Akron Black Artists Guild. So Akron, Ohio, there's many ways I like to describe the city. If anybody cares, it's the home of LeBron James. Yeah, that's right. We all culturally know how Cleveland can be the butt of jokes in our country. Imagine being Cleveland's little brother. And that's Akron. So during the pandemic, we went through quarantine, we went through the kind of racial uprising of America, and around that same time, the city of Akron was creating what we call the Akron Cultural Plan, which is basically a 15-year strategic plan for arts and culture in the city of Akron. Akron has about 200,000 people in it. It's a Rust Belt town. And a part of that plan, the way it was done, there was a lot of community meetings about what people would want in this plan. There's all kind of people in these meetings, and one of those meetings was a room full of Black artists. And over this 2.5-hour meeting time where we were hanging out, it kind of came up that, like, what if we had a group of some kind, like some kind of power in the city? And someone was like, well, what if we had a guild? Like, what would that be like? And people were like, oh, that's a really, really cool idea. And then we left, and nothing happened. And so right after George Floyd was murdered, I got an email from our service organization saying, hey, we really think we need to get this part of the cultural plan going. So we started just convening Black artists over Zoom, which was very difficult because artists are like herding cats a lot of the times, and it was on Zoom. But we were having all these discussions, and we were talking about like how we were feeling over quarantine, what we were going through, and we were hearing a lot of things about Black artists feeling like they were alone in Akron even before the pandemic, feeling like they didn't know where to find other Black artists. They felt like they weren't a part of the arts and culture sector, the nonprofit arts and culture sector, and they wanted a proverbial like space that we owned as Black artists in the city. And so after hearing kind of the same thing over and over and over, there was kind of a group of 8 of us who became like the core group of people who really decided to drive this thing forward. And I was one of the 2 people who kind of co-founded this and led it forward. And we decided that we'd reach out, ask for a little bit of money from the Knight Foundation in our city, and we were just like, we're just gonna start doing stuff. Like, we don't know what we're doing. We're just gonna do stuff. So as things started changing a little bit, we could be in person in a little bit, we were like, all right, we're just gonna get together at the bar. Let's just start there. And then at the bar, we figured out like, oh, people are really having trouble with marketing. All right, let's try to figure out a marketing class we can put on. And then things started rolling a little bit, and we tried out this funder speed dating event so that artists and funders could get to know each other. So that was a thing that happened. Whether it went well or not sure yet. We started having cookouts and things we call cousin dinners. So we're all cousins, right? So we're just eating together, being together, building community together. And then eventually when we started getting some larger grants, we started doing fellowships and commissions for Black artists in Akron. And we realized we're 2 years old, coming up February 2nd, and we've realized in our short time together that our responsibility is to build the community that's there, so it's collective and it's organized, so that we have a power in our city. A lot of Black artists in Akron, and I'm sure across the country, often aren't a part of the nonprofit sector because they have no clue what that even means to be a part of that sector. So a lot of us will go into like for-profit industry doing that work. And so a lot of them want to understand like, what is a grant? How do you write a grant? Who are the people you even talk to? Who holds the money? Like all these things. And we're just like, well, we can just be here as a conduit to give people that information and then let them do with it what they will. So it's been a journey. We'll get into more. It's not always easy, but that's what we're doing.
Well, hi everyone, I'm Katie Miller, and I was unceremoniously nominated by my fellow podcast hosts to speak on behalf of the team today because they're the worst, all of you. No, actually they're the best, and I'm really happy to be with all of you today, and thank you for having us. So the No Business Like podcast, which we just actually launched in October, so it's only been out in the world for about 3 months now, is really seeking to fill the need that the 5 of us saw, and we think the rest of the industry is really acutely feeling, of finding a way to train and acclimate emerging talent, and maybe those switching roles in the industry when there's very little time for hands-on training. So we're all presenters, the 5 of us are all presenters, but we come from very different communities and very different organizations, and we engage in different spaces. So we are engaging in affinity groups and state presenters networks and APAP committees, and we are all hearing the same thing over and over again. So many people are burnt out and leaving. We're hiring great new people, but there's no time to train them. New staff are struggling with the pressures that they're feeling of like having to jump in day one, being experts in their role with, again, no training. There's no professional development budgets or PD sessions, or time for PD because of the pandemic. And so folks can't go to conferences and that sort of thing, and the list just goes on from there. So in talking about these issues in these spaces and just amongst the 5 of us friends, and talking about how we were handling them in our own spaces and with our own staffs, we landed on this idea of a podcast that would really try to meet those needs through essentially a training tool in your earbuds. So that industry professionals in any situation could really use, outside of a busy workday or outside of kind of a predetermined time for a Zoom PD session or something like that. Because we're all really busy and we all don't have time necessarily during the day to take to do that sort of work that we really need to do, but it just falls to the bottom of the list, right? So what we really did was figured out how we could use this tool of podcasting and then distributing it to get more of a behind-the-scenes look at the industry through interviews with our colleagues from all aspects of the field. So we're talking about the artistic side, the business side, the work-life balance of it all, how people got from point A to point B to point Z in their careers. People are giving wonderful career advice. And it feels like we're really capturing industry knowledge, helping tell untold stories of our friends and colleagues that hopefully are acting as sparks of inspiration or creation for those that are listening. And we really strive to do that all in a very funny, thoughtful, and informative manner that's easy to listen to and digest, but that hopefully helps everyone listening along through their journeys in this current moment. So I think my friends made me sit up here because the phrase "do the thing" is one of my catchphrases. And I think it really does capture the essence and the ethos of this project, this side project that we decided to put together. So we're not affiliated with one singular organization. We didn't ask for permission or say to anyone, would it be okay if we do this? Like, what do you think? Is it okay if we just do a thing? We just decided to do it purely because we have the passion for it, and we had the capacity to create this project as a service to the field because we saw a need and wanted to help fill it. And while it's really in its infancy, we've dropped 13 episodes thus far, and the most recent one that dropped was an interview I did with the amazing Krista Bradley just last week. The feedback we've gotten from while we've been here has been incredible. Our colleagues have been overwhelmingly supportive of the project, which is so nice. For the 5 of us, it really reinforces that the need for this sort of training, ongoing training, does exist, and that we're moving in the right direction. So, yeah, we did the thing.
All right, thank you all for sharing the origin story of these incredible projects. I have thousands of follow-up questions, but I don't think that we have the time. So the question that I want to, so the thing that I kind of want to move forward with and hear from your personal experience, whether it relates to this project or not, is what is the best piece of advice that a mentor gave you? You can go in whatever order you'd like.
Boundaries? I think we all know this. It's placing boundaries and really knowing your capacity. It's interesting, I don't know if you all saw, there was, I think it was an interview with, and I forget her name, but she is one of the performers in the musical Six. And they were saying that they work at 75%. They put 75% on stage, and there was a lot of pushback on that from the industry, like, oh my goodness, how could you not put 100% of yourself on stage? And actually, I don't think any of us should be putting 100% out there ever, because we need that 25% for ourselves. And if we need to push when there is that moment of oh no, we have to, that you are in a stressful situation, then you have that 25% reserve. But at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself, because nobody and no organization is going to take care of you. So I encourage you all to work at your 75%.
I love that, and I think it relates to what I was wanting to share on this topic. It's not so much something that I learned from a mentor per se, but I did learn it from someone who gave a really awesome workshop on this. I'm going to answer the question, I wish I had known. And I wish I had known earlier in my life that accountability is a process, it's a journey that we're on. It's not a fixed place to arrive, and especially with complex woundings or complex tryings, when you try something that fails in certain ways or harms people in certain ways and also helps in other ways, it can be really complex to be accountable for the impacts that you have. So I think realizing that it's not about are you accountable or are you not, are you taking responsibility or are you not? But what are you doing to hold the needs of the people that you're in relationship with and be in responsive accountability to their needs and what they have to say, and also their the need for their creativity and their ideas to also live and breathe. Yeah, I think that would have helped me have more courage, feel freer to listen, to be humble, to admit my shortcomings, and to apologize more, and to be a better collaborator and work with a team more collaboratively.
I just want to make a correction. It wasn't an artist from the musical Six. It was from 1776, was the artist from. Don't want to put the wrong musical out there.
Best piece of advice I received in my career has been work through the mud and don't worry who sees you get dirty. Which is, for me, always been about not hiding process, right? Like when things aren't going well, don't hide. I think it's our nature to not want people to see us not knowing what we're doing. I'll give you a really quick story. So the Guild, we got a call from a major national funder in August. And the call kind of went like this. It was 10 minutes. Hey, we like what you're doing. We want to hand you $250,000. Oh, okay. After that, silence for months. Emails, nothing back. We basically get a grant package to our fiscal sponsor right before Thanksgiving that lays out a grant that's not aligned with who we are at all. It basically took the power away from the 8 people of the Guild and tokenized one black person to be an executive director and run the whole thing. And so we said no. And the backlash from us saying no has been pretty extreme. And some of the people in our Guild, their careers have been affected greatly since then. But what we did, instead of hiding, we just told people. We told everybody. We got black artists together on a Zoom and it was like, this is what happened. This is how it's going. This shit is really hard. We're working through it. Because we felt the responsibility to admit to people that like, this stuff isn't easy just because we have a nice website that says we're the Akron Black Artists Guild, so that people after us, when they try to do their own thing, they can mitigate the expectations of how easy or how hard all this is supposed to be. And when we hide stuff, it makes it all look like this stuff is so easy. But it's not. So let's just say it.
I would say the best piece of advice I've ever received was from a college professor when I was getting ready to graduate. Can't tell I'm a very type A person, very focused, and was very stressed about like what the next thing was going to be. And he said, Katie, life isn't a straight line, it's a zigzag. And it was like, because no one had ever told me that before. And I think we're so trained, and as arts professionals, we're trained to like focus so hard, but if anything, the last 3 years have shown us is like, there is no A to B. You have to take the punches and roll with them as they come. And frankly, like, I never expected to be a podcast host. This is not something that I thought would ever be in my life, but the opportunity presented itself, and I took a little zig. And it has been wonderful and fulfilling and has filled me up so much and given me so much hope for the future, frankly, and energy to keep moving forward. So I'm really glad that I can embrace that, and I really hope especially emerging talent and up-and-coming professionals can take that as well and remember that, like, it's little moments and it's little zigs and zags that get you from A to B, and it's not always a straight line.
Thank you all. That's some really fantastic advice and some information there. Javier sort of alluded to this, so I kind of want to expand this to the rest of the panel. But before you started your projects, or maybe really kicked off this next phase in your career, what do you wish you knew before, and that you know now, and maybe why you wish you knew that as well? So I'll let any of you kick that off that wants to.
I'll go first this time. How about that? So on behalf of the podcast team, I think the first thing we wish we would have known is that Brian Selmer is an amazing audio editor. So I want to give props to Brian because he does all that work for us. But he's really wonderful at it, and I think we didn't know that about Brian. So it was a great, wonderful surprise. I think we also wish we would have known how useful this would be to more than just emerging talent. We've been hearing from a lot of folks that have been in the industry for a long time that they are learning new things and they are finding moments of inspiration as well. So that's really helping us expand our focus and our mission with the project. And I think, or we hope anyway, that great things will come out of that. And I think on a personal note, I wish I had known when we started this conversation that it would be easier than I thought to find my own voice within the project. I have a very different interview style than my colleagues do, and that's okay. And I was a little nervous being like, I'm not an executive director. I don't have the same experiences as everyone else. No one really knows who I am. But I've really been able to lean into the things that I'm passionate about and bring my own perspective and voice to not only the interviews, but the conversations we have on the topics on the podcast. And frankly, it's been really empowering. And I was really nervous about that when we started. And I wish I had known how much easier it was going to be than I thought, so I didn't stress myself out so much. So.
I wish I would have known that when you're trying to do something that in your context is revolutionary, there's always going to be well-meaning people who give you advice that steer you away from your vision. We went through a long process over these 2 years of a lot of people who really, really, really wanted to help, a lot. But we're trying to create a collective leadership style, not a hierarchical one. And some of these well-meaning people, they're like, but you have to have an executive director. You have to have a single leader. And it's like, well, no, we don't have to do anything. We can just do this. And kind of the second part to that is, and I wish I would have known that our expectation doesn't need to be a large nonprofit organization. We can keep our little fiscal sponsorship. We can stay as small as we are, never have a budget over $75,000 a year, and that's success. All we need to do to be successful is the vision and the mission that we have. And I wish at the beginning I'd have been a lot more connected to that, as instead of getting a little pulled around by well-meaning people who don't really understand the vision of what you're trying to do.
I love that, and I think it hopefully will inform how we are with each other in circle later in the session. Because the should language, especially, saying you should do anything can just be so limitedly helpful, slash sometimes not. I just want to add to what I said before about accountability that's in the context of working in community, which we really all are. Even if our institutions feel really disconnected from community, and if our communities have not, really built community, if our institutions haven't really built meaningful community yet, you're still in relationship to who you're serving, and that can always deepen. And then also just that. There was one more piece about that I really had wanted to highlight, that had to do with not getting frozen in my own awareness of my privileges. Like, I think learning accountability as a process, as a way of being in relationship, in community, is a way to build resilience to the things that come up when we are honest about our privileges. In other words, the guilt and shame that can come up, guilt, privilege that can come up, is, I think, a healthy response to the truths of inequity in this society. And then the question becomes, what will you do with that? Will you live accountably? Will you try to build in right relationship, equalizing relationship with peoples around you? So yeah, does very much connect to privilege there. And we all have it in this room. I have plenty, and that's why I mentioned my Stanford degree.
This is kind of a challenging question for me, it is like, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? And I think for me, given that Rhythm of the Arts still in the iteration it is now is so young, I wish I had taken more time at the beginning. Even though it's really only 2 years old in this iteration, I feel like at the beginning, because of, the pandemic, because of just this conditioning of always having to do something. And I think a lot of us probably were feeling that as the pandemic hit. It's like, no, we just have to keep moving forward. We just have to keep booking and then rescheduling. And then, oh, that doesn't work. Okay, let's reschedule again and let's reschedule again, because then we were doing something. So for me, what I learned from that and am now incorporating into what I do is allowing myself and giving myself permission to take the time and realizing that it is a process. And while that sounds elementary, I feel like sometimes it's helpful for us to remember that collectively and individually, that everybody is in their own process, and allow yourself and others to take a breath.
Can we all actually just take a breath?
I just want to thank you all for joining us today. As Danielle said, if you would like to connect with any of the panelists or us, on the table there is the QR code on the bottom of that sheet that'll take you to that sheet. There is website links and contact information. I think I speak for most of our panelists. I'd say all of our panelists and us. We're more than happy to continue this conversation after this and to talk about, or answer any questions or anything that we can do for that. I will say that if you are interested in the podcast, we have cards and stickers at this table right over there. I won't use left or right this time, Brian. But they are just up front. Feel free to take some, share them, talk about it. Let us know what you think. Let us know if there's a topic or a conversation that you want to have, because we want to know those things. And again, thank you all for joining with us today. I heard some great conversations, and I appreciate being so vulnerable and open with us today.
Yeah, claps for Kevin. This has been an absolute delight. But we do want to make sure everybody knows that there is one final session of the day. It's in the West Ballroom. It's a ancestral community listening event. Sounds incredible. Would be great if you wanted to head over there with somebody that you met, continue this conversation, or you can stay here and hang out if you want to. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you all.